Welcome back to Horses of Courses. I'm Tinia.
I'm Suzanna.
And this is your April 2025 episode. I cannot believe that we are already 4 months through 2025. And this has been a crazy busy month. Suzanna and I headed into April, coming back from Fort Worth, Texas from a conference. Then we went right into a Charlestown Feral Horse Clinic with Riding Far. Justin Hafner and his dad, Paul Hafner, hosted us. An incredible, I think, concept that we hope to see through 2025 across the United States. Then we went to Equine Fair in Columbus, Ohio, and that was very successful. Saw some babies adopted into really good situations. And now we are gearing up for the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off Pickup, and that is why I'm coming to you right now from around Mumfordville, Kentucky, near where Suzanna lives. We are like kind of in the throes of moving horses. So I'm here to pick up a custom gate for our new round pen and pick up a couple of horses tomorrow, and also stop by Kentucky Humane and pick up a horse that's being turned over to us. I'll head back to West Virginia, and then Suzanna and Nelson will load up some horses, and they'll head our way to West Virginia Sunday.
Yes.
Yay.
Yay.
Fun times. So I just want to mention like the amount of time people take off or make themselves available. You know, it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, not going home till Thursday just to make this happen for a lot of people. Suzanna and Nelson come from around 4 hours away. Tinia comes to help us from New Jersey, so I don't even know how many hours, probably 12 or so hours.
I don't know.
And lots of volunteers coming from everywhere. So that's the very last few days of the month. So if you are watching the ATFO, there are still horses that haven't been posted yet, and we're going to get them up there. And we hope you really feel super engaged with this year, because I feel like Suzanna processed the applications. She was the main processor. Different people like review the submissions, but I think this was the most applications we ever had.
It was quite a few.
And I think the caliber of the applications were up in general. I think we actually declined some applicants just based on, hey, you're a good applicant, but we don't have enough horses. So I think that's a good problem to have. So we're excited about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about the ATFO later when we get to discussing sponsorships. But our first topic for this month's podcast centers around lameness. That's a big thing for Heart of Phoenix. Sometimes, you know, if you were to be in our chats as we discuss whether a horse is comfortable, I think you'd have to be kind of impressed, don't you think?
About how many we discuss it about, or about how good we are discussing it?
Well, neither of those how much we seem to care about how comfortable the horse is.
Oh, well, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, like we are deeply invested in the comfort of the horse. And so
there are so many different aspects to keeping a horse comfortable. Yeah.
Well, as we were headed out this evening, we were talking with a trainer about just a horse that rejects a certain kind of saddle. And I would love to have heard what other people would have taken away from that conversation. But I think the way we talked about it, I kind of just wish you could be a, what's the term?
A fly on the wall.
A fly on the wall, yeah. And just hear how much it matters to the people we work with that train the horses, and how much it matters to us that a horse is comfortable, and that we can believe that a horse could wear a saddle and be like, ooh, I hate this.
Well, listen, I can totally relate, because I don't have any kind of a waist at all. My rib cage sits right on my hip bones. And if I have on a certain pair of pants, I am a grouchy, meanie person until I can get those freaking pants off, because it just irritates the crap out of me. So I can totally relate.
Well, and I think even last month in the episode, I talked about the way I am intolerant to a racerback bra.
Yes.
I cannot stand it. It changes who I am that day. So in that vein of like comfort for the horse, and those are things that are comfort minded. And when you talk about lameness, it is different. But just the fact that we really are always so much in a discussion of, is this horse comfortable? And then that question of, is this a comfort thing? Is there an actual lameness? What is happening in the horse's body? And so about 4 years ago, our vet, Dr. Walker at Equine Medical Center, he owns the practice, and he owns, I think, around 14 practices, but there's one equine practice, and that's our main vet. He comes every Monday. He was like, hey, I bought this new machine. It's called an Equinosis Machine with a lameness locator. Can I start using this just to see how I feel about it? Because I'm thinking about buying it, and very few vets have one, and they're very expensive.
And vets love nothing more than to try out a new piece of equipment.
Right. And
that's kind of fun.
Well, and we really, I mean, and he's credited us to allowing him to really put that to use early on.
Oh,
because of the number of horses we get in the various backgrounds.
Right.
And so this machine, I want to mention Dr. Walker first, is an incredibly gifted lameness vet. He was a horseman for many years before he became a vet, and he uses horses in his work. He has a huge cattle farm, and they work cows and sheep. And so for him, he's a horseman first. And every vet, that's not their wheelhouse. They'll never be talented at it, and it's okay. Maybe they're an incredible surgical vet, or there's other things. There's many things that you can be good at. Dr. Walker is a really good lameness vet. But he recognized as a scientist first, because he was a chemist for years before he became a veterinarian, the science behind this machine really was interesting to him. And so when he started using it, he was impressed at the data it produces. And Suzanna has seen it.
Yeah.
So
I like data.
Suzanna likes data, and a lot of our team does. And the thing about this machine is they put a sensor on their head, a sensor on the rump, and a sensor on a front foot. And you can adjust it as best I understand, whether, like, if it's a gaited horse, to account for change in gait. But this machine measures the way the horse moves independently on each leg and the whole body, and it gives you a reading that indicates where is an abnormality in gait. And so then you know where to explore. Obviously, the vet is watching the horse move as well.
Actually, he's really more listening. He listens to how it sounds, the cadence
sounds. So Dr. Walker,
Me too.
being a really good lameness vet, I do think, the cadence and what kind of sound, our barn has concrete, and just like hearing the
slightly
change
out of rhythm.
Yes. And that's always kind of, to me, very, very impressive.
I'm good at that part too.
You are. Listen, Suzanna can hear stuff that blows my mind. But she'll be like, are you in your kitchen filling an enameled teapot with water? Yes, Suzanna, actually I am. But people don't always think about hearing the gait abnormality. And so if you have something that has concussion, right, where you can really hear it, that really impacts it. So with the Equinosis machine, it gives you measurable data. And we were talking earlier, and the thing that I said was it gives you something to measure against when the horse maybe has something that's healing, and you want to know, is it healing? And maybe that vet sees 500 horses in a month, and he saw your horses 30 days ago. How well does he remember? So when he says it's gotten better, how do we know for sure?
Or you're in a multi-vet practice and you can't see the vet you saw originally.
Yes, and I thought that, to me, was a great point, because we tend to see the same vet, but everyone doesn't have that ability. And so if you are struggling with a horse that you're not sure about, is stuff improving? Is this really lameness? Whatever. If you have the ability to reach out and say, hey, do you know a vet that has an Equinosis machine? And I do think you want somebody who's a talented lameness vet viewing this information, but it does give you measurable data. And I have been very impressed with it, because I'm kind of a skeptic about everything. Suzanna would know. I'm just like, ew, I don't think so. But I really have liked it. And I appreciate having a horse on it, and 4 weeks later, I can look at the information it gives me and say, well, there's been a 90% improvement. Well, that's information that I really appreciate having, and I'm sure an owner would. So if you're in a setting where you're dealing with some lameness, maybe just see, is there a hospital close to you where you have access to this? Because having a baseline and then being able to compare that as the horse goes through potentially a healing process is so important. And then if the horse isn't getting better, then you start to think, I'm dealing with a chronic problem. And that's important too. Up next, we're going to circle back to the ATFO. So the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off is coming up, and we've been doing, since the beginning of 25, we've been talking about how can you help us in your giving each month with something very specific. This month, I just wanted to tell you, while you certainly can still send Quest Plus dewormer, we need that. That's always helpful. The thing that I would encourage you is to look at the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off and see how you might become a donor to an individual horse for their vet day to head out to the trainer that's going to select them. If there's a horse you really like, you've been following their story, would you please think about covering their vet costs before they go out?
Because our vetting is like, it's a long process for this, and we're doing like so many horses. It's
so
wild.
much. It's so much.
I love it though. That's my favorite part of the ATFO, really, is vet day.
I mean, it is fascinating, but it's a lot of work, and it costs, sometimes $10,000. And so think about, is there a horse you followed their story, you just really love that horse? Could you be the farrier sponsor for ATFO pickup for that horse? And that's $50 if they have a trim. Or could you be the vet sponsor for that horse? And for a lot of these horses, it's around $400. If you can't do the $400, could you be a lameness Equinosis sponsor? That's around $100. Could you be the vaccine sponsor for $100? Could you be their Coggins sponsor for $40? Just look at the list of horses, and if you're saying, I'm not even sure what horses are going to ATFO, it's fine. Go to Appalachian Trainer Face-Off on Facebook and look for the 2025 album. Look through the photos. Is there a horse that catches your eye? Okay, I'd like to find a way to help this horse on that journey. We need you to do that. It's a huge expense. And as I'm talking about this, I think Suzanna brought it to my attention, but I shared a story and somebody said, just rescue horses, and I'm summarizing this, but the gist of it was rescue horses from kill pens. The horses in rescue, they're already safe and don't need any help.
Yeah.
And that really bothered me, because actually getting the horse in the rescue is a very easy process. Getting the horse healthy and safe is the hardest thing. Keeping the horse safe over a large amount of time, that's even harder. And watching the horse and making sure your organization still exists when the horse gets adopted, needs to come back, that's the hardest thing. Getting a horse out of a broker lot scam or getting a horse out of a bad situation is the absolute easiest thing you could do. The hard part and the expensive part, that all happens after. So,
which is what all the people that find out when they bail a horse from the broker lot scheme, then they call us because they're like, we didn't realize it was going to take this much money.
Right. And so by the line of logic that the other lady said, well, they were already saved, who cares? They weren't safe. They weren't saved.
Well, we've got the 4 and the 4 babies waiting on us.
Right. And Suzanna can tell you about that.
Yeah. So we've got 4 that were bailed, 4 pregnant mares, and 3 of them have foaled so far that were bailed from a kill pen scheme that somehow wound up being shipped out of where they were supposed to stay for quarantine into some place in Kentucky, then wound up in another place in Kentucky who couldn't deal with them, who called a trainer that we've worked with in the past and said, can you help me get these halter broke? And then ultimately she said, can you help find these horses a place to go? And that trainer called us because the horses are not handled enough that they're not going to wind up in a mess. They are, did I say that right? They're not handled enough that it leaves them in danger of winding up in a mess. So as soon as the ATFO horses leave, we have to go get those 4 mamas, and right now there's 3 babies. We're waiting on 1 more baby to be born. So
and these mares are all, a lot of them thin. None of them have gotten what they should have gotten at this point in pregnancy or birth. Like, they're the people who have, like, cobbled things together to help them get safe. It's a hodgepodge version of what should have happened. Had the horses, we would never have gotten involved in a broker lot, but had they came to us in some way earlier on, they would be much further along than they are now, because they would have landed with a real rescue. And so it's
taken a lot of money for us to just feed the 1 pregnant mare left. Fortunately, a lot of people have chipped in, but still, people are like, the ones in rescue don't need any money.
But not compared. Can you imagine? Here's the thing, and I really want this to sink in with people. If we had been willing to lie about it and say, because many places will, these horses are ready to be slaughtered. Here's how much money we need. We'd have gotten 4, 5, 10 times what we needed. We were very honest. You did the post, told the truth. These horses were caught in a pretend broker lot scam or a pretend kill pen scheme. And now, but they desperately need help. They needed it then. They didn't get it, but they needed it. And in fact, now these horses have ended up in a bad situation, and somebody needs to help them. And the response was very low, very low. And so I would like to point that part out. Like, we're fundraising to try to get them what they need, but people aren't super into giving toward their story. Thank you for those who did. If you're hearing this and you did give, we appreciate it. But, sponsoring the ATFO, if you're looking to help a horse, that is the way that you really invest in the long-term quality of life a horse could enjoy, 100%.
Yeah.
So, with that said, up next, we have this kind of sad story. And, the beginning of this year, we started telling you guys rescue stories, and I think all of them have been happy. And I think that doesn't represent what rescue really is. Sometimes we end up in stories that are sad. And some of those stories make it seem like we always make the right decision. And we don't.
Nope.
We don't. We share the things we do with you because of the hard way we learn them. And it's always my hope that when we share the hard lessons, and we may not share them as much on the podcast so far, but we do, I know for sure, share them privately with people, or, in individual posts we do on our own pages, that people understand we've made the mistakes, and that's how we end up kind of with a different position. So this story is one of Claire. She was a young Morgan, as best we knew, mare. She came from what I usually will say, a pretend rescue in Ohio. And when I say pretend rescue, sometimes people are like, well, that's being judgmental. I mean, I do rescue. I know when something's really rescuing. I know when it's not. This was not real rescue. We helped when they asked if we would take a really kind of troubled horse that they said wasn't leadable, probably in 2015, probably 2014. I think around 2014. We accepted her. They said they would bring her to us. At the time, we had a foster in Kentucky. And when they brought her, they had put a rope halter on her and loaded her. They had torn her face off, like her skin on her face kind of rolled, like peeled back, because they had torn her face off. And this was the organization that received her and had her in their care. It wasn't like we asked them to pick her up and bring this horse. They asked, can you take her? And we said yes, and that's the way they brought her to us. She was very, very, very thin. I don't know that I would say emaciated, but it was borderline emaciated. But the skin on her face just torn off from a rope halter, just getting her into the trailer. And really, from the time we started handling her, she was reactive, but she was not necessarily dangerous or anything.
She was here. Raven worked with her in the round pen and liked her.
Yeah, so she was here a while. I even had forgotten that.
Yeah, she was here.
But here's the thing, though. The part that I think is important about the story, she was so many places.
Mm-hmm.
We had her
She
so
was
many
a lot
places.
of places.
So we had her come into that place, and Suzanna, I guess that's what it was. You brought her back here. We said we have, she has a need, and she had been there.
Remember, she got loose from us in Kentucky, and you and I went and
at
caught
the
her,
foster.
and she broke my toe.
Yes, and that goes into what we're going to talk about later. Just loading her ended up breaking Susanna's foot.
Just my toe.
And
I had others.
And she did. She got away, and out there she was like, I'm going to live. But she had been with us a while. She had been vetted, and she had been pretty handleable for us. She was not a feral horse. If we knew what we know now, I think we would have made lots of different calls. But she, so she came back here with you.
Yeah. And Raven worked with her and got her leading really solid and making, being respectful in the round pen, all that kind of stuff.
And then...
And I think Raven even got her wearing a saddle, but she never did get on her.
And then she went to...
Because Raven got her wearing a saddle, and she was like, I just don't... There's something about her I don't feel comfortable about sitting on her.
I do think that's...
she was like 14 or something.
Yes, Raven was. So then she went to Olivia Dixon.
Yes.
And Olivia had her and rode her and had lots of reservations about her. She came back and
remember, she wouldn't load in Olivia's trailer, and Olivia was like, I think we're just going to have to put her to sleep. And then lo and behold, the mare stepped up in the trailer.
Well, and we wouldn't literally put a horse to sleep that didn't get in the trailer, but it was just like that thing of like, I don't know, maybe we don't move forward. And here's the thing, when you're hearing this, years were going by. Yeah. Actually, so I'm like looking back and trying to think. I think we got her in 2013. I'm pretty sure we got her in 2013. So we're in 14, 15, 16. She was with Olivia a long time in training. She never felt great about her. She was evaluated by Mike Hurst at the ATFO.
And he felt she was blind.
He said she acted like a horse that was blind. Her eyes were checked. She had totally great vision. And then she went to Aubrey at Adkins Performance Horses for a long time. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, this horse was being ridden. But there was a volatility there. And stuff that there were unsafe things happening, speckled throughout her whole time with us. Year after year after year after year. And
see, when Raven said she wasn't willing to get on her, there wasn't even any specific thing.
It was a feel.
It was just a feeling.
Yeah,
she was
right.
Like, I just don't feel right about this horse.
Yes. And so she was adorable. She was so adorable. And it got to the point where I started talking about, I don't feel good about this horse. I don't feel like she's even comfortable. I think what we're seeing is a horse is really not comfortable living in the world that we live in. And this was probably 2016, 17. So we're like 3.5 years into, this journey. And what happened is we liked her. We liked her even though she was not particularly always safe or steady or predictable or even living a great life. We got attached to her. And she was so cute. And I will never forget, and the accountability that I bear for this happening is great. And I should bear it. I talked about euthanasia for her pretty much probably a 1.5 years in. I was like, I think this is maybe the right choice. Nobody was like, yes, I think it. And it's not like anybody under the bus, because it was a hypothesis, maybe. We're like, no, this will this. But there were various people that would say, well, I don't feel really great about this part of her. And like Raven, I don't feel really great about sitting on her. I don't think Olivia ever felt great about anything. I don't think Aubrey did. Nobody felt great, but nobody was like, I think that this is the end of the line. And so we ended up...
But see, in the beginning, though, we were like, well, Raven's a kid and maybe somebody with more experience.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Like, not the child. A child should never make that call. We would never have paid... Like, even if a child had made that call, we wouldn't have paid any attention to it. But in hindsight, the fact that her, with the horse experience she had early on, said what other trainers that were adults in the industry being paid were saying. She did pick up on what they all ultimately said was, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. But nobody really wanted, and it's not like a past the, like, accountability, the buck. Ultimately, I watched it and I knew something was wrong, but this was now what is 2000, almost a decade ago. Almost a decade ago when it all ended up coming out.
You know what I thought about, though? I wonder if we'd have taken her to Dr. Freeland, would we have found her neck was screwed up like so many of them have been?
Well, I don't think so in her case, because a lot of her stuff was on the ground. She had ground stuff. A lot of the more dramatic stuff was under saddle, but on the ground, you could tell with Claire. And so what I feel like with Claire was she had been so sensitive and handled so aggressively that she literally had PTSD episodes. I could believe there were other things, though. But with Claire, even before anybody was on her, I feel like you could tell there was something in her mind where she would disconnect and do things that weren't safe. But there could have been discomfort factors as well. But ultimately what happened is we had this great gal who had been a pretty high-level rider. She came from Alaska, and she started working with her and riding her. And, she had been ridden. So, and this was a talented person. And we had the discussions, like we did give full disclosure. And she had been riding her. And there came a day where Claire did what Claire would do. And Claire totally disconnected from what was happening. And Claire flipped over on her. And Claire didn't just flip over on her. She kept flipping over. And so she drug her and flipped her and over the fence and just kept flipping. And probably somebody would hear that now and say EPM. This horse was not neurologic at all. It really was a disconnect in her mind. And my part was that accountability of, like, I loved this horse. We collectively had invested in her and really cared about her. But it could have killed that girl. And it was an eyes wide open thing, and this was a horse professional, but we had seen so many things along the way, and like the rescue we are today would have been different. But, after that, it was one of those things where we're like, we do have to make a decision here. And like, euthanasia is the right thing. She could have killed somebody, and she is going to kill someone someday, on the ground or under saddle. And under saddle would have been more likely. But that was a game changer for me in how we move forward, because I made the call that could have killed somebody, right? Like, I was the ultimate accountability there. And I said, let's go ahead and put her into this thing, and, or we're going to let people work with her. And, in hindsight, it could have been Raven, could have been Olivia, could have been Aubrey. It could have been that girl. After it, somebody could have died, and we have to take accountability as professionals and make good calls. And the horse was troubled and not living a high quality of life. She wasn't even particularly liked by the herd. Something was wrong. We don't get to know what was wrong. And so when you tell rescue stories, I think telling one like that, even though, I hate that story, but I appreciate that it happened, because it's allowed us to make better calls and keep people safer, I think. And I hope when people hear it, they make better decisions, because you really could save somebody's life hearing that story if you pay attention. Yeah. So with that,
But you know what? It's okay to make mistakes. It's just not okay to keep doing it over and over and over again.
Right.
Sure, it'd be really nice if we could go back and erase that mistake.
I would love to. But yeah, like, when you do the wrong thing, say that I've done the wrong thing. And there's a line where you can defend your wrong thing to the point you're not learning. I don't want to defend those mistakes heavily. I did the things that I thought were right at the time. In hindsight, I see I could have made better decisions. And I wish I had, for Claire's sake and the people who were involved, for everyone's sake, that I had made a call sooner. But with that story, because of all the way that it went, I think we've done a lot of good as a result of that, and kept people and horses safer. So that story, she's certainly not forgotten. I think of her pretty often, and I wish we could have gotten to her sooner. And it's hard to say. A lot of people think that horses are damaged by people. We know, because of the number of horses we've dealt with, there are horses that are damaged at birth, or they're genetically set up for dangerous behavior. And people don't love that.
Or they're selenium deficient, and then it doesn't get corrected.
Yeah, some kind of nutritional deficit can set a horse up for failure. So when you hear of a horse that's doing dangerous things, for one, we are the first to say probably a person's handling them wrong, and probably that's happening.
Yes.
But if you have really good people handling the horse and there's still dangerous behavior, it doesn't mean that the horse was handled poorly. It often does mean there was a nutritional deficit in utero or at birth. It means genetically there was something went wrong. There could have been oxygen deprivation, or they were a dummy foal that didn't get the Madigan squeeze, which we talked about, was it last month?
Yeah.
Because they can survive, right?
They can. And
there's a deficit there. So those are things to consider. Every horse that is dangerous doesn't mean a person did it. Sometimes it means
a lot of the adult horses end up with some kind of brain lesions that make them be violent.
What kind? Andalusians, did you say?
Oh, I said a lot of adult horses.
Oh, they said Andalusians. I was like, oh, I didn't know Andalusians had brain lesions. I was like, what? Okay, adult horses can have brain lesions. That makes more sense. It's not the Andalusians. It's brain lesions. Yeah, an Andalusian could get a brain lesion. There are things that can happen. We had a narcoleptic horse that started being very dangerous, and we did a necropsy. We never found out why, that a horse went from safe to totally dangerous and narcoleptic.
Yeah,
in a matter of weeks, months, few months or weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was so sad.
That was sad.
But anyway, with that said, talking about horses then with disadvantages, and I don't want to be super specific because honestly, I don't want to give attention to organizations doing what I think are detrimental things to horses. But what I will say, and would allow us to talk about other situations that play into this, is, around a month ago, there was stuff being posted about a very, very disadvantaged foal. And this is our Ding-a-ling of the Month episode. And the number of, I was very outspoken about kind of like quality of life at the time. I wasn't real specific as to what I was talking about, but enough people knew that there was like pushback saying things that very much was comparing the existence of a horse to a human being. And I just want to say, not just my opinion, but there's a ton of research and intense psychological investigation into the damage you do to a horse when you pretend they're human beings.
Yeah.
A ton. And so I just tried to talk about how an animal is made to be and how much exploitation can happen and how much attention a person can want where the animal's on the receiving end and they don't thrive. And I don't even know how we can ever put into words the damage it really does a horse. But Suzanna was telling me earlier, well, instead of talking about that specific instance and giving it attention, what if we talk about stuff we've had happen that are similar? And so one of those instances is we had a little narcoleptic foal, was a little mini.
But she didn't wind up with narcolepsy, though.
No, narcolepsy was a byproduct, but narcolepsy is always a byproduct, though. But he felt like she was having seizures.
She was having seizures. Yeah.
So we had this little baby. We called her April. Funny. We're 2 years ago, right? That was 2 years. 2 years ago in 2023, we had this little baby.
Such a cute little mini baby. And she came
Adorable.
to us with her head all beat up.
Yes. So somebody reached out and turned her over. We named her April. She came in at the beginning of April. Little tiny mini. I mean, this little baby probably weighed 40 pounds. And yeah, she had all this head trauma. Her head looked too big. And so the actual initial vet thought she was a dwarf because her head was so big. But it was because she had brain swelling.
Yes.
And she would have what looked like narcoleptic episodes. And we had narcoleptic horses. I think we dealt with it twice. And with that one mare we mentioned earlier. And I think maybe one more time. But so the initial vetting was, hey, this is a narcoleptic baby. She would go down, I mean, what was the number? I can't even remember. We had her, I mean, like 20 times an hour. Mm-hmm. It was like 20 times an hour she would go down, lay down, fall down. And she was on her mother. I mean, this was a little baby. She was like 4 weeks old. And it was, everybody just thought she was adorable. Everybody that came in the barn picked her up, carried her around.
She'd pass out. They'd carry her around. They'd put her in the wheelbarrow and take cute pictures of her while she was passed out.
Yes. And I will say, we didn't do any like big fundraising on her. We're like, we need to take her and get her to Haggard. And that's actually, I think when we started going to Haggard in Lexington was maybe.
Well, because we went to that vet Dr. Hughes recommended.
Yeah. So
who turned out to have done a big research project on just this kind of foal, but we didn't know that at the time.
So Susanna's vet here in Kentucky recommended a certain doctor in Lexington. So we took the baby there. Susanna took the baby, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, Susanna took the baby, and you hadn't seen the baby until you took her.
Yeah, I don't even know how. I think somebody drove her and brought her to me.
Brought her to you at Haggard and left her there with the mother. Mm-hmm. And so
we had to take her out of the trailer on a stretcher because she was passed out.
Yes. And so we had her seen, and essentially Susanna was there. Like, I know what they said, but what did they tell you, Susanna?
He said it wasn't narcolepsy. She was having seizures, and that every time she got stimulated, it threw her into a seizure. And then he said, see, watch. And he just blinked his light in her eye, and there she went.
And 20 plus times a day. So you're talking about the wear and tear on this little baby's joints. Horses don't go down. They may lay down once a day.
Well, he said it was hurting her.
Yes.
He said because I can't remember what was sore on her. Something was really sore, and when he touched her, she went after him. And he said she's physically hurting herself because she's going down so much. She's like got bruises that we can't see and things because she's hurting.
So not only was she like falling into things, causing herself like head trauma. And again, we're talking about a 40 to 60 pound baby. We're not talking about a full size horse.
No,
I mean, she was a tiny little thing. And not only that, but the fact her joints, a horse's joints were never meant to lay down and get up 20 times an hour. Babies might lay down once every few hours, whatever that is. But this baby was going down 20 plus times an hour and getting herself back up. So the wear and tear on her legs was also substantial. And so,
and he said, you know, you can take her home, but you're going to have to keep things really quiet, and you're going to have to keep the lights in her stall really dim, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what kind of life is that going to be?
Right.
Who's going to do all that?
Well, and even if they would, it would have destroyed any quality of life.
Right.
Be in an environment, there's nothing happening. But here's the thing. Even overnight, you could see the baby overnight. She had been down. I mean, down and out. Even in the dark, there was some amount of going down because the mother was in there with her, stimulating her.
Right.
Well,
that's why she came to us with her head so beat up.
Yes.
Because
nobody was doing anything. She was just with her mom. So, ultimately, we were like, this is a clear euthanasia. It's the only kind thing we can do.
Which he was happy about, but the interns were really upset, and they had to have a big discussion with the interns about that.
Yeah, which would have made no difference to what we decided.
Right.
But it was the right thing. The vet knew it was the right thing. The vet he thanked you. And didn't he thank you?
Yes, and he thanked us.
Yeah, for not exploiting her. Because they were used to.
And that's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
Thank you for not exploiting her.
Yeah. And so, you know, what I tell people, what we would have liked is for them to say, we can fix this. And we would have fixed it. Yeah.
Give it to her every day. She'll never do this again.
Or here's a surgery and we can fix her. And we could have made that happen. If the assurance was very high that it would work. We could have done it, but there was no such thing. And if you don't think Heart of Phoenix could have used videos of that baby to make big money, then you're nuts. But we would not have done it.
We could have said, "Oh, we're going to build her a padded stall."
Oh,
with a
yeah, and people would have paid for
light,
it. Yes, yeah.
Blah blah blah.
And she just wants to live. We could have done all that, but it would have been a cruel, exploited fundraising campaign, and we just simply wouldn't. We would not. And so, with that said,
it sucked.
It was sad, and she was a
sucked.
doll. But you know what? And I said to Suzanna earlier when we were discussing, like, what are we going to talk about? There are hard things that happen, and you have to be willing to do the hard things, or you shouldn't be in the hard jobs. I spent some time, and this is, I think, specifically, it kind of rings this story true, not about, and I never ever want to compare horses and humans, but your emotional compass as a person, we come to a thing as a human being. I used to do, now I lay me down to sleep, photography. And I did a photo session for a trisomy baby. We knew the baby could not survive. Usually the babies don't survive, but moments after birth. And you had a sibling, right? There was one sibling, or there were two?
I lost two.
Two that were trisomy babies. So
one was trisomy. The other one had a stricture in his cord, and he starved to death when he got so big.
So, but one trisomy baby.
Yeah.
And so I was called in to do photos of a trisomy baby. They made all these concessions for me to show up as a volunteer photographer to shoot the photos. And they knew the baby would not survive. And I knew. And I went in and I stood on the side of the surgeon when they did the C-section. The little baby was born. The little baby was supposed to be a little girl. The family had a little girl. The little boy was born. And it was a really hard thing to hear the family. I remember to this day, the guy going, "Babe, we have a son. We have a son." What if I had the mindset that some people in rescue do and decided to champion that and go, "Well, he's going to live"? What kind of like destruction could I have caused in that setting? Obviously, I did not. I watched the professionals do what needed done, and it was stuff that's not my story to tell for the little baby who didn't have what he needed to survive. Suffered to the absolute end over the period of a couple of hours. I stayed and photographed him for the family. And it was a gut-wrenching thing to see. And he's a little person. And what we do for humans and horses are different. But watching a little baby born without what he needed to survive die was one of the things I simply will never forget. And so horses aren't human beings. But when we are presented in a situation where we can make different decisions with animals, then we should. And to ever exploit a little horse, a little baby horse that depends on us as an advocate to do better, we shouldn't. And if you need attention so bad that you're willing to do that, I hope that you find something else to do with your life where animals aren't under your care. So that's how I feel about it.
But we have spent a lot of money to save a baby that the outcome was predicted to be great. So
the outcome was not predicted to be great. Like it was predicted to be feasible to be okay. Because you're talking about Rita, right?
Rita, yeah.
Yeah. The outcome was, it was fair to make that big stretch. But it was like 50-50.
Yeah, but he said he would know by the time he put her second shoe on whether she'd be okay or not.
So yeah, I mean, that, if we hadn't have had the discounts we had, that would have been around $20,000 probably. It was all said and done. We had significant discounts, but was that 2014?
I'm not good at
2014, I think it was 2014 or early 2015. We did an extensive surgery on a foal who was alive and well, and adopted by one of our core volunteers.
Because I badgered him into it.
Yeah, badgered her into adopting the little gal.
I did.
Yeah, Rita. If you are interested, like look up the story of Rita on our social media. It's an incredible story. We are never saying don't go the extra mile. We'll go twain but you do want to know that the outcome is a natural, happy, pain-free life.
Yep.
It's very likely. And so we did, in that instance, it was a lot of surgery, but in the end, the little horse is now not a tiny little horse. She's a big grown mare in a very wonderful home. But it was a big journey.
It was a big journey.
Big journey. And Susanna did most of that.
And if he'd have changed her second shoe and he'd have said, well, this is not going to be okay, we'd have put her to sleep.
Even after all of that investment.
Even after all that.
And there was never, if you look back over our social media, there was no exploitation of it.
No.
It was, here's what we need to give her best shot to fix it. And there's a good chance it will work. And we did it. And it did end up working, and she got a home.
Trail rides all over the place.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are important. Important. I'm currently from Brooklyn. I'm from Brooklyn
tonight.
It is important, and I guess there's this whole theme throughout all this with I wasn't even thinking about, like the Equinosis Machine and Claire and the whole like soundness and comfort of the horse is so important. And you can do all of that, and still, horses will kill you. Our main topic, horses will kill you. Not just they can, they will.
They will.
They will. One of the things that I get such a kick out of when somebody says, my horse would never, and then the horse comes nevering like never before. Yes, your horse will kill you in the right setting. They're not looking out for your existence moving forward. Will the horse be aware that you're there and move aside? Sure.
Most
I mean,
of the
sometimes. Time. Yeah. But so the reason we're talking about this is I went into a situation in a really, really poor rural county in West Virginia about 2.5 weeks ago. There was a little colt that had been born there, and his deep digital flexor tendon, probably as best we could tell, had snapped about a year prior. And there was certainly no fixing that. The hoof had grown out wildly long. I can't imagine the pain this little horse was in. He had been barely handled. He was in a little mud lot. And I just had one helper who's not very horse knowledgeable, horse savvy. So, and it was a long drive there. It was almost close to dark. So I go out to get the little guy. The people are scared of him that are turning him over. And they're actually telling me maybe one day he could be ridden. And I'm like, this is wild. But I've heard crazier things. And I'm trying to put a rope halter on him, but he's rearing. He's trying to bite me in the face and everywhere and just continually rearing. But he's tiny and he's not in great shape. And as I tied the rope halter, my right ring finger kind of gets almost tangled in the rope as I'm tying it. And he's rearing, and like my nail gets caught in the rope, and he rears and just breaks my finger. And it's one of those things where I was like, oh, he's broken my finger. There's nothing you can do. You've got to get the horse out of there. And I thought, well, this really hurts. But what are you going to do? And so with my non-savvy horse person.
Well, this really hurts.
This really hurts. I mean, I even had I didn't have tears, but I felt like I could have if I had allowed myself. Because, I mean, he broke it. I mean, it snapped. It's like, I was like, oh gosh. Well, here he's still rearing and rearing and rearing. And he's trying to bite my face off. And I'm trying to lead him a very long way because it's a very rural area. And I could only back the trailer so far on the road. And his skinny, starved mama with really severe DSLD, we'd already put her in the trailer. And that helped because this little guy had never been hauled anywhere. And while I'm walking, and the volunteer who's not horse savvy, who has many times almost gotten me killed.
Me too.
I don't even know. Me and you both. Love her, but we've almost died so many times because of the things that this very well-meaning person does. I love her, but almost died so many times. And I say to her, listen to me, as the horse is rearing and trying to strike and bite me. And my finger's just broken. I'm like, listen, when I get this horse in there, you've got to close the gate. But don't you do nothing till I tell you. There's this conversation. So I put him in. And, we take him to the rescue. But it was funny. So I sent a picture of my broken finger to Suzanna, and she sends me one back of her broken finger, which
is broken.
But you had a surgery and everything.
I had to have mine pinned back together. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my horse, who would never hurt me, it was feeding them, and I had a Heart of Phoenix horse in with him, and that Heart of Phoenix horse came rushing over his bow, and he wheeled around to get her and kicked my finger and broke that bejeebers out of my finger, and I had to have it pinned back together.
It didn't get pinned very well, though.
Well,
it's still a bit cockeyed.
No, it was great in the beginning, but he said 30% of the time after you pin these together a year later, they fail, and that's what happened to mine. It was almost exactly 12 months it failed again. It's called a mallet finger. I have a mallet finger.
Well, and so this is the third finger I've broken with Heart of Phoenix, but this one's the most kind of weird. And then you've had a finger, an arm, but tell them the story. I think the way we should end this podcast is Louie, because we haven't told that, have we?
No, we haven't talked about Louie.
So, what'd Louie do?
So we had this pretty gray thoroughbred.
I loved him.
Whose wiener was broken.
Yeah.
And he was emaciated, and they couldn't do the wienerectomy until he gained weight.
But so the reason the wiener was broken, he was so emaciated that he didn't have enough protein to retract his penis. And so it hung out so long that it pulled so much blood that it could never retract again. By the time we got him, you could never have supported it enough. It was kind of almost necrotic.
Yes.
And so.
But they wouldn't do the surgery till he gained more weight.
Right.
So I have a really nice farm. The whole thing's entirely fenced in. And sometimes I can turn out a single horse on my farm. They could just pick the best grass and they gain weight really fast. That's what he was doing. He was making really nice progress. And I was walking down to feed him, and there was a horse on the other side of the fence who came rushing over, and kind of the same thing that happened with my finger. He wheeled around to kick my daughter's horse and got my arm instead, shoved my arm into my ribs and sent me flying about 10 feet. And Nelson Detweiler was on his way over to my house to measure for my gutters, and I was passing out, and I knew that if I could get the phone open, he would be the last phone number on there. So I called him, and I said, "How far away are you from my house?" And he said, "Well, I'm told you I'm on my way." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm laying out in the yard with a really broken arm, and I need your help." And then I passed out on the phone with him.
But he came and found you.
I woke up with him yelling in my ear. He came, picked me up, and put me in the truck. It was very, very broken. It looked like a bag of Dollar General ice. And so he kept telling me it wasn't broken because I wasn't crying. See, I had on 6 sweatshirts because I'm so cold-natured.
Right.
And we couldn't take them off. And I was like, it's broken and it's very, very bad. So they x-rayed it and they said, "You're going to need surgery." And I called Tinia and she's like, "You're lying."
I did. I was like, there's no way Louie broke your arm.
I called her and I said, "Tinia, Louie broke my arm." "No, he didn't. You're lying." I'm like, "No, I promise you he did." "No, he didn't. You're lying." So I send her the picture of me in the hospital gown. She's like, "Okay, you have a urinary tract infection.
You're in the hospital for some other reason."
So then I send her the picture of my x-ray and she's like, "You took that off the internet." And then it's like, she says, "Wait, it's got your name on it." And
I was like, oh no, somebody has broken her arm.
Then you said, "Okay, your arm is clearly broken, but it wasn't Louie." And I'm like, "I promise you it was Louie."
Right. And so I too can be part of that. "Oh, the horse would never do it." Yes. They will. And was he trying to do it to Suzanna? Makes no difference. She was there in the middle of whatever he was, carrying out.
And I didn't even think that he was this horse that was all by himself on one side of the fence. I had no reason to think that feeding him was going to be dangerous. It never occurred to me that the horse rushing him from the other side of the fence would set him off.
Right.
Boy,
Things we learn, buddy. And so we hear so many times, this horse would never. And just recently, I shared it on the Heart of Phoenix page yesterday. We have a very knowledgeable horsewoman who's fostered a lot of horses for us. And she was working with a semi-feral horse. And she had her lunge rope coiled in her hand. Really very aware person about her rope.
Not coiled around her hand.
No, not coiled around her hand. Coiled properly in her hand. The horse bolted and she felt like she had enough rope to still hold on because you don't want to let the rope go. But in fact, she had miscalculated and she didn't have as much rope, and the horse pulled it. She felt like the horse was going to get away. She went ahead and dropped it so it didn't jerk her, but the rope wrapped around her legs. I only posted one photo, but there are 3 different photos of the rope burns because when it hit the ground and she tried to get away, it tangled around her legs.
I had that happen once. That's a sick feeling.
And yeah, and she was very worried about it and very obviously cognizant of the rope. So the rope burns around her legs, front and back, are so bad. And, you know,
she said, I got a learn burn. That's what she
kept calling it, a learn burn. And it's like, it could have happened to anybody, you know, when you're handling unhandled horses, especially. So, you know, don't ever get so cocky that you think, well, I can't get hurt. It really could cost you a limb, an appendage, or a digit.
Or 11 months in a cast.
It could cost you time in a cast. It could cost you your life. Don't say things like, my horse would never. Your horse isn't plotting your demise, but your horse simply being a horse could get you killed. There's no way around it. Your horse just living his life could put you in danger and you could be killed.
You know what makes me cringe the most? I don't know why people do this, but they build their stalls and they put their feed box in the corner so that they have to walk into the stall 6 feet into the corner to feed their horse who's in the stall. That is the most dangerous thing on the planet. Like, they don't make a hole where they can dump the bucket through the hole into the corner. They make it so they have to walk in there and feed the horse in the corner 6 feet into the stall. That's so dangerous.
Well, I think it's dangerous, but actually at the rescue, it's kind of the same.
That's bad.
I know, but we didn't build the stalls, but like if you have the ability to plan, I do think it is best. I do think you ought to work on a horse that you absolutely can go in and feed them. But if you're dealing with horses you don't know,
well, I'm talking about training barns where they get new horses or whatever.
If you have horses you don't know and you don't know the horse, who's the horse on the opposite side that they're going to decide, much like what happened to you with Louie.
Right, that too.
You know, and so it is. I mean, it's a risky thing. We've recently changed it where what we're doing is feeding them in pans, and then once the horse is eaten and it's empty, you go in and take the empty pan and bring it out, as opposed to where we had them hanging. But the way that the stalls are made, you can't hang them at the front. They're inside, and you don't know the horses. So it is, think about that when you're laying out a barn. If you have the prerogative.
Get to build a barn, talk to people who know.
And if you just have the horses you have at your house, you know, whatever. I do think you ought to be able to feel safe going into a stall with a horse you know, feeding the horse.
Well, yeah, you can teach a horse to go away from
to
be fed.
But what if you're dealing with horses you don't know?
Remember Oberon and how I taught him to go to the opposite side of the stall before he could have his food, and the volunteers at the ATFO came and told me he was sick
because he went away from the food.
Because he went away from the food and dropped his head down, and they're like, he's sick. And I'm like, no, I taught him to do that
because he was so aggressive about his food. And I think we could tell you all 20 stories, 30, 40, 50 of how...
We're good storytellers.
Yeah. And well, especially about like dramatic things happening where you almost die. And there are so many instances where like a horse wasn't aiming to kill you, but in fact you were in the way and you almost die. Yeah. Don't think your horse won't. It's not personal, but you could be killed. Take that stuff seriously. Handling a horse safely is important. And frankly, if you do everything right, it's still dangerous. That's fine. I know what I'm signing up for. Susanna knows what she's signing up for.
I'm signing up for less these days.
Yeah.
I'm not as mobile as I used to be.
Right. Well, because you have a broken arm, a broken toe, and broken fingers.
And no chest muscles.
Yeah. And I've had like 3 concussions from horses on top of it in settings that
one of them where you were being dumb.
What one?
The
one
where
I sat on top of the round pen.
Panel. That was, you were dumb.
Yeah. But you do what you do when you go out to get horses that are sketchy. I don't sit on round pen panels anymore.
She is teachable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just, that last concussion, I was like, I don't want these anymore. Anyway, that's all we've got for now, guys. That's it. We're at the end. We've actually talked more this time than usual. We're almost at an hour.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. They've got extra special bonus on top this month.
And we're going to give them pictures of our fingers.
Yes. So if you see the photo of like this month, it'll be my crooked finger and Suzanna's broken fingers. I hope your fingers stay whole and not broken. I'm Tinia.
I'm Suzanna.
That's Horses of Courses.